But I hopped a bus down to 34th in Lexington, where we have a couple of Pray phones. I don't like to repeat myself, but if you're not familiar with Pray, she was a 1970s, 1980s phenomenon. There it is. She was described as an elderly white woman who just went around town etching the word pray and love God and go to church and that kind of thing. And it's pretty hard to find these days, but I refined my prey hunting skills, and suddenly it's like I was finding her all over the place. No dial tone here, no number shown either. That looks like some kind of mold. No dial tone, and based on the area code shown, this phone was probably moved in from Queens or Brooklyn or wherever, Bronx. They move the phones around, but they don't bother changing the numbers, and the number shown on any of these CityBridge phones does not match the ANI that would show up on caller ID when you call somebody. And that's because over the course of a few years, they converted all of these from landline to cellular, and all calls that go out over CityBridge phones go over the Verizon cellular network. Yeah, there she is again. I was so excited when I started finding these, but once it became obvious where to find her, like what style and vintage of payphone, it became kind of monotonous. But I'm still happy to see it though. And there's my shadow. This again is the proper vintage 1980s era payphone enclosure where you'll find her, and this is about as clear as it gets. A lot of times it's pretty subtle, and I've directed people to some of these etchings, and they look right at it and they cannot see it. They insist they just simply cannot see it. This one I don't think anybody would have a hard time seeing. And just as a joke, let's see if this one works. Of course not. The graffiti is like, really does seem to have accumulated during the pandemic. I know that, I hear a crackling on the line with this one, but no dial tone. Intersection is the company that owns CityBridge. Oh, there's a nice sentiment. I love poop. Intersection had posted a job opening for a payphone technician maybe about 4 months ago, and I don't know whatever came of that. The job posting is no longer up, but I don't know that the position was ever filled or that any of these things ever started getting maintained again. I'm going to go over to one last Pray phone. I don't want to get boring about the Pray thing, but she's quite the archaeological find. I'm outside of Bellevue, the august, storied, venerable St. Elsewhere of New York. And there's a long line of people waiting to get in. I didn't think the general public was allowed into hospitals these days, but whatever. I actually ended up getting admitted here once. It's sort of the climax of one of the sorriest periods of my life. But I was basically trying to kill myself. But it's all over now. Everything's fine. The reason I came back over here was not to talk about my sob story, but this is the last pray that I'm probably going to get to today. The rumor among street artists of the day, the 70s and 80s, was that Prey had been a nurse at the psych ward here, and that she just lost her shit in dealing with the patients that came through there. True or not, I don't know, but I came through here a couple of times thinking that if that was true, then maybe Bellevue itself was ground zero for her for her etchings, and maybe they were all over the place in the building, but I found nothing to support that. There are a bunch of payphones inside Bellevue, but they're not managed by any payphone service provider. They're managed by the hospital. I guess whoever does the hospital phone network is responsible for that. And this line of people waiting to go in is, well, I've never seen that here. Anyway, these used to be Prey phones, and this was about as close as I could get to my belief that Prey started here, but there's no evidence to support that. If she really did work here, then maybe this was the first phone she scratched it onto, but nothing to show for it now. Just a couple of yellow mats where presumably a Link NYC kiosk will one day appear. So this is First Avenue at Mount Carmel Place. I don't think the general public is allowed in to Bellevue or most hospitals now unless you're sick or know someone inside who is. So I'm not going to be able to show the Bellevue payphones, which is too bad because they're actually pretty interesting. I bet you that's a COVID ambulance. I mean, I hope not, but reality being what it is, I'll bet you that's a COVID ambulance. Langone Hospital, NYU Langone is near Bellevue, also on First Avenue. And last time I was in there, they had a few phones in a sort of repurposed, they had a little payphone room that had been repurposed into a storage closet. But I'm not going in there today. I just don't want to be in a hospital, you know. COVID cases are spiking all over the place, and it looks like I would have been allowed to go in, but those phones are located in a really awkward spot. And like I said, who wants to be in a hospital these days, even for just a minute? I can't find a plaque or anything that identifies the artist or what the name of this is, but it's pretty cool. First Avenue and 34th Street. And, so this is a CityBridge rig. You would never find Prey on this one. When I talk about knowing what vintage payphone enclosure to look for, this one's way too modern. This style didn't hit the streets until the 90s, the mid-90s, and she was assumed to have been long gone by then. But one of the many things that makes her so interesting to me is that experts or so-called experts in the world of street art and scratchiti and street artist graffiti and that kind of thing, across the board they'll tell you that she's basically vanished from the streets. And I've been inspired to find that she's not. And I've tried to get this through to some people. They just don't seem to care. I think they'd rather not be proven wrong, perhaps. I don't know. Yeah, I could steal that, but I don't want to bother. So I'm walking up First Avenue toward the United Nations, where the UN building itself, I know, used to have some beautiful old wood phone booths inside. I never got to see them though. Just never got around to it. There had been a quantity of CityBridge phones along this stretch of road, but I think they're probably all gone by now. There was at least one Pray phone. I'm going to monotonously apologize if I'm getting boring with regard to Pray, but what can I say? She's a fascination of mine. Yeah, they took this one away. You can't see the yellow mat under the snow, but those two metal poles are evidence that this used to be a payphone location. I'll be surprised if there are any left around here. There used to be like one every block or two. I didn't know Robert Moses had a playground named after him. I mean, what hasn't he had named after him? So this is the last one around here I was going to look for, but as expected, it's gone. And you can't see the yellow mat, but it's almost certainly there. This phone was involved in some kind of runaway case. A runaway teenager made a call from here, and somehow somehow it got back to me that the number was posted on my website, and that it played some part in tracking down where the runaway kid was staying. And a similar thing happened with a woman somewhere in Texas, where her daughter had run away, and caller ID showed the number. She typed it into a search engine, found my website, and boom, they were able to figure out where she was. I love stories like that. They don't happen so much anymore, but things change. 42nd Street's pretty empty. But then this end of 42nd Street usually is pretty quiet anyway. Grand Central was starting to feel like its old self again. I mean, it's still a ghost town compared to so-called normal times, but there was definitely more of an energy there when I just passed through earlier today. I want to go check in on one last phone, then I gotta head back, but there was, and this one I'm checking in on for my own personal scrapbook. This is when we filmed a spot for CBS Sunday Morning. I guess that was about 2.5 years ago now. We did most of the filming at the New York Public Library in the semi-famous wood phone booths down on the lower level. But we did one last scene at a couple of phones on 42nd and 5th across the street from the library, where It was like B-roll film, I guess you'd call it, where they told me to just sort of fiddle with the phone, you know, pick it up, put it down, maybe look like I'm dialing a number or something. So that was what I did for, it seemed like a long time. But as those things usually work, we film, you know, if we film for a half hour, they use 10 seconds of it in the final piece. And that's just the nature of the business. Not a complaint, just an observation. But what was most memorable about this was the smell of piss in that payphone enclosure was overwhelming. I did everything I could to keep my eyes from watering and getting my reactions on, you know, on the video. And I actually had to step out a couple of times. I'm like, guys, this really smells nasty in there. And I mean, everybody laughed, everybody thought it was funny, but I was just like, and I saw the humor in it myself. But wow, the suffering that I go through for art, right? I'm glad these are still here, because these I just wanted to get for my my personal scrapbook. When I did, I was featured on CBS Sunday Morning maybe about 2.5 years ago, and we did most of the filming over there at the New York Public Library in the semi-famous wood phone booths that are downstairs. But we did one last segment up here, B-roll footage, I guess you'd call it, where they had a camera behind me and a camera just on the other side of this opening. And they just filmed me fiddling around with this phone, you know, dialing numbers, hanging it up, picking it up, hanging it up, looking like I'm talking to somebody. What I remember most was that the smell of piss in this particular enclosure was overwhelming. And you know what? It's not exactly subtle right now either, but it's nowhere near as bad as it was the day we filmed here. And I was doing everything I could to maintain a straight face. But I was starting to feel sick. I was really starting to feel nauseous. And my eyes would water a little bit and we'd have to stop. But what can you do? What can you do? You suffer for your 15 minutes of fame, right? This is a lot more graffiti than I remember being on this one. There's your old Bell logo. Yeah, I'm glad to have captured these one last time. Most likely one last time. I don't know if you can see, but there are two others across the street next to that newsstand. This one's showing some rust. As things go, these two are not as big a scrapbook item as the phone booths in the library, but I'll take them. I actually like the handprint. Oh, there are two of them. Well, when the library ever opens again, I'm definitely going to document as best I can those phone booths in there.